On the day my grandmother's will was read, my mother swore my inheritance was safe. 3 weeks later, the ring vanished, and my brother's girlfriend suddenly had no more debt collectors calling. Then I found a receipt with my name forged and a jewelry store owner who got nervous the moment I said the word consignment. I did not beg or scream. I did something worse. I bought the store and pulled every secret they thought would stay buried. My name is Charlotte Redmond. I stood on the porch of the house I grew up in, staring at the peeling white paint on the doorframe. It was a humid Tuesday in late September, the kind of day where the air felt heavy enough to wear, sticking to the back of your neck like a second skin. Inside, my family was gathering for what my mother, Diane, had termed a necessary administrative meeting. My grandmother, Vivian, had been gone for exactly 3 weeks, and the silence she left behind was louder than any noise my relatives could make. I took a deep breath, smoothing the front of my blazer. At 32 years old, I had built a life in Denver based on precision. I worked in risk and compliance at Brightwell Analytics Group. My job was to look at messy situations, find the discrepancies, and fix them. I lived my life by spreadsheets and clear expectations. But standing there, listening to the muffled sounds of forced laughter coming from the living room, I felt that old familiar knot of anxiety tighten in my stomach. I was not walking in as Charlotte the professional. I was walking in as Charlotte the daughter, the one who was always too serious, too rigid, too much like the mother-in-law Diane had merely tolerated for 40 years. I opened the door and stepped into the cooling rush of the air conditioning. The house smelled of lilies and stale coffee, the scent of a funeral that refused to end. My mother was in the center of the living room, holding a tray of store-bought cookies, playing the role of the grieving but resilient matriarch to perfection. "Charlotte," she said, her voice pitching up a notch, performing for the audience of aunts and cousins. "You made it. I was worried the traffic from the airport would be terrible." "I got in last night, Mom," I said, stepping past her to set my bag down. "I told you that," she waved a hand, dismissing the detail. "Well, you are here now. That is what matters." I scanned the room. My brother, Ethan, was sitting on the love seat. Next to him was Sienna, his girlfriend of 2 years. Usually, when I saw Ethan, he looked like a man carrying the weight of the world, or at least the weight of his own bad decisions on his shoulders. He was perpetually broke, always one bad break away from losing his car or his apartment. But today, he looked different. He was leaning back, one arm draped casually over the back of the sofa. He was smiling, and Sienna was glowing. She was scrolling through her phone, showing something to my Aunt Carol. "It is just such a relief," Sienna was saying, her voice carrying across the room. "We feel like we can finally breathe again, a fresh start." I frowned. The last I had heard, Sienna was dodging calls from 3 different collection agencies, and Ethan had asked me to borrow $500 to keep his lights on. I had said no. I always said no lately. I moved toward the kitchen to get a glass of water, trying to shake the feeling that I had walked into the wrong play. My cousin Jenna followed me. Jenna was the quiet one in the family, the observer. She leaned against the granite counter as I filled my glass from the tap. "Hey," she said softly. "Hey, Jen. Holding up?" She shrugged. "Grandma is gone. It feels weird." She paused, looking down at her hands, then back up at me. Her eyes were searching. "Did you ever get the ring?" I froze. The water in my glass sloshed over the rim, cold against my thumb. "What?" "The ring," Jenna repeated, lowering her voice to a whisper. "Grandma's diamond. The solitaire. I know she left it to you. Mom said Aunt Diane mentioned she was going to give it to you today." My heart did a slow, painful thud against my ribs. "Mom told me it was in a safety deposit box," I said, my voice steady despite the sudden drop in my stomach temperature. "She said she could not get to it until the probate paperwork cleared." Jenna looked confused. "That is strange. I could have sworn I saw her holding the velvet box earlier." Maybe I am wrong. She walked away, leaving me standing there with a wet hand and a dry mouth. The ring. It was not just a piece of carbon. It was the only thing Grandma Vivian had explicitly pulled me aside to talk about. This isn't just jewelry. Charlotte, this is proof. Proof that you are worth more than what they tell you. It was a 3-carat European cut diamond from the 1920s. A ring that had survived the Great Depression and a house fire. It was my inheritance. My only inheritance. I walked back into the living room, my eyes locking onto my mother. She was laughing at something Uncle Bob said, her hand fluttering near her throat. Then I looked at Ethan again. I looked down at his feet. He was wearing brand new sneakers, limited edition. I knew the brand because I had seen a targeted ad for them recently. They retailed for over $400. Ethan, who could not pay his electric bill 3 weeks ago, was wearing $400 on his feet. I looked at Sienna. She held up her phone to take a selfie with Ethan. Captioning this, "New Beginnings," she chirped. The math was not adding up. I walked over to my mother. "Mom," I said. I did not shout, but my tone cut through her laughter. She turned, her smile tightening at the corners. "Charlotte, honey, not so loud." "People are talking." "Jenna asked about the ring," I said, keeping my voice low. "Grandma's ring. You said it was in the safety deposit box. Do you have the key? Can we go get it tomorrow?" Diane's eyes darted to the left, then back to me. It was a micro-expression, a flicker of panic masked instantly by annoyance. "Oh, Charlotte, always rushing. It is not in the box right now." "Where is it?" "It is being cleaned," she said, snapping the words out. "It was filthy. I sent it to be cleaned and appraised. You cannot expect me to hand you a dirty ring." "Which jeweler?" I asked. "What? Which jeweler?" "Mom, I can go pick it up myself. I have the will on my phone. I can prove ownership." She flinched. "I do not remember the name. It is a place downtown. Stop interrogating me. You are ruining the mood." She reached out to adjust the collar of my blazer. A nervous gesture. That was when I saw it. On her right index finger, wrapped tightly around the knuckle, was a flesh-colored bandage. It was fresh. The edges were clean. It looked like the kind of cut you get when you are wrestling with something sharp like a box cutter, or a jagged piece of packing tape that refuses to give way. "What happened to your finger?" I asked. She pulled her hand back as if I had burned her. "Nothing. A kitchen accident. I was opening a package." "What package?" "Just a package. Charlotte, my God, you are exhausting." She turned her back on me, marching toward the kitchen. "Does anyone want more coffee?" I stood there, the vibration of her lie humming in the air between us. My mother was a bad liar, but she was an expert manipulator. She used volume and deflection to hide the truth. I stepped back, melting into the periphery of the room. I needed to think. I watched Ethan. He was whispering something to Sienna. I moved closer, pretending to examine a framed photo on the mantelpiece, turning my ear toward them. "Stop panicking," Ethan hissed. His voice was low, agitated. "I am not panicking," Sienna whispered back. "But she is asking questions. You said she wouldn't care about the jewelry." "It is handled," Ethan said. "Mom said she would stall her. Just keep smiling. We paid the lawyer. Okay, the garnishment is gone. We are free." The garnishment. Sienna's debt. The room suddenly felt very small and very hot. I looked at the new shoes. I looked at Sienna's relieved smile. I looked at the bandage on my mother's finger. I did not make a scene. That is what they expected of me. They expected Charlotte to get rigid, to raise her voice, to cite rules. Then they could paint me as the hysterical, greedy sister who cared more about a diamond than her grieving family. I knew their playbook better than they knew it themselves. "I have a headache," I announced to the room at large. "I am going to head to my hotel. I will see you all tomorrow." "Leaving so soon?" Diane called out from the kitchen, her voice bright with relief. "Okay, honey, get some rest." She did not walk me to the door. I walked to my rental car. My hands shaking so hard, I had to drop the keys twice before I could unlock the door. I sat in the driver's seat for a full minute. Just breathing. In, out, in, out. The logic center of my brain was booting up, overriding the hurt. I drove straight to my hotel. I did not turn on the radio. The silence was necessary. I needed to assemble the facts. Fact 1, Grandma left me the ring. Fact 2, Mom lied about its location. Fact 3, Ethan and Sienna suddenly had money to pay off significant debts. Fact 4, Mom had a cut on her finger consistent with opening a shipping box. I walked into my hotel room and opened my laptop. I pulled up the email Grandma had sent me 6 months ago. It was a PDF of her last will and testament. She had sent it to me secretly, with a note, just in case Diane tries to get creative. I scrolled to Article 4. Section B. To my granddaughter, Charlotte Redmond. I leave my 3-carat European cut diamond ring, set in platinum. This item is to be given to her immediately upon my passing, separate from the rest of the estate distribution. It was black and white. There was no ambiguity. No, at the discretion of the executor, it was mine. I picked up my phone. It was 4:45 in the afternoon. The bank would still be open for another 15 minutes. I dialed the number of the local branch where Grandma had banked for 50 years. I knew the manager, Mrs. Higgins. First National Bank. This is Linda. Hi, Linda. It is Charlotte Redmond, Vivian Hart's granddaughter. Oh, Charlotte, I am so sorry for your loss. Your grandmother was a wonderful woman. Thank you. Linda, I am actually calling with a quick question about her safety deposit box. Mom mentioned she might have left a few documents in there, and I wanted to know if I am on the access list to come check tomorrow. There was a pause, the clicking of a keyboard. That is strange, Linda said. What is... The box is closed. Charlotte, my blood ran cold. Closed since when? Since last Thursday. Diane came in and closed it out. She signed the surrender form. The box is empty. Last Thursday, 3 days before I arrived. 3 days after Grandma's funeral. Did she take the contents? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Yes, she cleared it out. Since she is the executor, she has the right to access it. Is everything okay? Charlotte. Yes, I said, my voice sounding hollow in my own ears. Everything is fine. I must have misunderstood her. Thanks, Linda. I hung up. The ring was not being cleaned. The ring was not in a box. The ring was gone. I sat on the edge of the hotel bed, staring at the wall. They had sold it. My mother, my own mother, had taken the one thing my grandmother had left specifically for me, and she had sold it, and she had done it to pay for Sienna's mistakes. She had liquidated my heritage to buy my brother a fresh start. The betrayal was not sharp. It was heavy. It felt like a physical weight pressing down on my chest. It was the confirmation of everything I had always suspected, but never wanted to believe that in the economy of my family. I was the donor, and Ethan was the charity case that required constant funding. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. I looked at the screen. It was a text message from Diane. I picked it up. The blue light illuminated the dark room. Please don't dig into this. You'll ruin your brother's life. I read it twice. She knew. She knew I would call the bank. She knew I would check the will. And she was not apologizing. She was not denying it. She was telling me to stop. She was using the same weapon she had used against me my entire life, guilt. She was framing my theft as his survival. If I asked for my ring back, I was the villain ruining Ethan's life. I stared at the phone. For the first time in my life, the guilt did not work. Instead of sadness, I felt something else. I felt a cold, hard clarity. I was not going to ruin his life. He had done that himself. But Mom. She had just made the biggest mistake of hers. I did not reply. I turned the phone face down. The time for talking was over. The time for listening to their lies was done. I was not going to dig into it. I was going to bury them with it. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the parking lot. Tomorrow, I would find the receipt. I did not know how yet, but I knew I would. Because unlike them, I did not need to lie to get what I wanted. I just needed to be Charlotte Redmond. and Charlotte Redmond always found the discrepancy. To understand why that text message from my mother did not make me cry, you have to understand that I had been receiving versions of it for 2 decades. The words changed, but the frequency remained the same. You will ruin your brother's confidence. You will ruin the moment. You will ruin the family harmony. I was never just Charlotte, the daughter. I was Charlotte, the potential disruption. My role in the Redmond family architecture was established before I finished elementary school. I was the load-bearing wall, unnoticed, unpraised, but essential for keeping the roof from collapsing. Ethan was the chandelier, flashy, expensive, and constantly in danger of falling and shattering. I remember a Tuesday in November when I was 17. I was a senior in high school. Sitting at the kitchen table in our old house in the suburbs of St. Louis, I was studying for an AP Calculus exam. My books spread out in a precise semicircle. Ethan, who was 19 and supposed to be at community college, burst through the back door. He was pale, sweating, and smelled like stale beer in panic. He had backed my mother's sedan into a neighbor's brick mailbox. The bumper was hanging off like a broken jaw. When my mother came home, she did not ask why he was driving her car when his license was suspended. She did not ask why he was home at 2 p.m. She looked at his trembling hands, and her face softened into that terrifying, unconditional indulgence that I had never once been on the receiving end of. She hugged him. She told him it was just metal and plastic. Then she looked at me. I was sitting there, silent, watching the scene with the judgment of someone who had never broken a rule in her life. "Don't look at him like that, Charlotte," she had snapped, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "He is shaken up. You always have to be so superior. Don't you? You always overreact." I had not said a word. But my silence was an accusation, and Diane Redmond could not tolerate anyone accusing her golden boy. That night, she wrote the check to fix the neighbor's mailbox from her personal savings, so my father would not find out. I went back to my calculus. Learning the lesson that would define my early adulthood facts did not matter in this house. Feelings did. Specifically, Ethan's feelings. The only place where I was allowed to be a person, rather than a prop, was in Grandma Vivian's kitchen. Vivian Hart lived 3 streets over in a small brick bungalow that smelled of lavender wax and Earl Grey tea. While my mother's house was a minefield of emotional tripwires, Grandma's house was Switzerland. It was neutral ground. It was safe. I spent most of my weekends there. We would sit at her small oak table, the afternoon sun filtering through lace curtains, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. That was where I fell in love with the ring. It was impossible to miss. It was a 3-carat European cut diamond, set in heavy platinum. It was not delicate. It was substantial. It was a rock. Grandma wore it on her left hand every single day, even when she was kneading dough or gardening. She used to tell me that the scratches on the platinum were just chapters in its history. One afternoon, when I was 22 and fresh out of college, I was crying at her table. I had just landed a junior analyst job, but Diane had spent the entire celebratory dinner talking about how Ethan was thinking about applying to Fire Academy, a plan that lasted exactly 3 weeks. Grandma reached across the table and took my hand. Her skin was paper thin, spotted with age, but her grip was iron. The diamond flashed in the sunlight, sending a prism of rainbows dancing across the wall. "Charlotte," she said, her voice raspy but firm. "Look at me." I looked up, wiping my eyes. "Your mother loves you," she said, choosing her words carefully. "But she sees you as the adult. She sees Ethan as the child. She will always run to the child. You have to learn to stop waiting for her to turn around. She won't." "It is not fair," I whispered. "No," Grandma agreed. "It is not." She twisted the ring on her finger. "That is why you need to build your own ground to stand on. Don't let them erase you. Lottie, you are not just the background for their drama." She took the ring off then. It was rare for her to do that. She placed it in the center of her palm and held it out to me. "This is not just jewelry," she told me, her eyes locking onto mine. This ring got me through the divorce in the 70s, when women could not even get a credit card without a husband. It is an asset. It is security. And one day, it will be proof. Proof of what? I asked. Proof that you were loved best by someone, she said, winking. That moment was the armor I wore when I finally left St. Louis. I realized that if I stayed within my mother's orbit, I would eventually be consumed. I would be the permanent safety net for Ethan's high-wire act. So I moved to Denver. I chose it because it was 800 miles away, too far for a casual weekend drop-in, but close enough for emergencies. I built a life that was the antithesis of the Redmond chaos. My apartment was modern, minimalist, and quiet. I had white furniture because I knew nobody would spill red wine on it. I had a savings account that I contributed to automatically every 2 weeks. I landed a job at Brightwell Analytics Group. It was the perfect place for someone with my particular trauma response. Brightwell was a risk and compliance firm. Companies hired us when their numbers did not add up, when inventory was bleeding out, or when they suspected internal fraud but could not prove it. My job was to follow trails. I spent my days staring at spreadsheets, cross-referencing shipping manifests with invoices, and tracking digital footprints that people thought they had deleted. I was good at it. I was excellent at it. I learned how to spot a lie in a ledger from a mile away. A forged signature has a hesitation mark. A fake invoice usually has a rounding error in the tax calculation. People who steal are usually arrogant. They think nobody is paying attention to the details. But I was always paying attention. It was how I survived my childhood. While I was building my career, Ethan was busy building a resume of disasters. There was the investment opportunity in a crypto mining rig that turned out to be a pyramid scheme. That cost my parents $10,000. There was the DUI that was miraculously reduced to reckless driving after my mother hired the most expensive lawyer in the county. That cost another $5,000. There were the rent payments missed, the car repairs needed, the temporary loans that vanished into the ether. Every time I visited home, I saw the toll it was taking. The furniture in my parents' house was getting shabbier. My father, a quiet man who had long ago surrendered his spine to my mother's will, looked more tired every year, but Diane would just smile her tight, frantic smile and say, "Ethan is just finding his footing. He needs support. Charlotte, not judgment." Then came the decline. Grandma Vivian's health started to fail about 18 months ago. It started with forgetfulness, then physical frailty. I tried to fly back as often as I could, but I began to notice a pattern. Every time I called to speak to her, Diane was there. "She is sleeping right now," Diane would say, or, "She is having a bad day, honey. Best not to disturb her." I became suspicious. I started calling at odd hours. I started calling the home health aide directly. I realized my mother was gatekeeping. She was controlling the flow of information, ensuring that she was the primary interface between Grandma and the world. At the time, I thought she was just being controlling, satisfying her need to be the martyr hero of the family nursing effort. I did not realize she was securing the perimeter. The last time I saw Grandma lucid was 3 months before she died. I had flown in for a weekend. Ignoring my mother's suggestion that it was not a good time, I drove straight to the bungalow. Grandma was in a hospital bed set up in the living room. She looked small, her formidable presence shrinking into the linens, but her eyes were clear. My mother had stepped out to the pharmacy, leaving us alone for the first time in months. I sat by the bed and held her hand. The ring was loose on her finger now. It spun around the knuckle, the diamond heavy enough to pull it sideways. "Lottie," she whispered, "I am here. Grandma. Listen to me." She squeezed my hand, her strength surprising me. "The vultures are circling. Don't talk like that," I said gently. "I am dying. Not stupid," she snapped, a flash of her old self returning. "Diane is already counting the silver. Ethan has been asking about the house." She pulled me closer. I could smell the antiseptic soap and the faint, lingering scent of lavender. "I updated the will," she said. "I sent you the copy. Did you get it?" "Yes," I said. "I have it saved." "Good. Because they will try to change the narrative. They always do. She took a ragged breath. If anything happens, do not let your mother manage your inheritance. She loves you, but she is weak when it comes to him. She will burn down the whole village to keep him warm. She lifted her hand and touched my cheek with the cold metal of the ring. This stays with you, she said. Promised? Promised, I said. This is proof, she repeated, her voice fading as the energy left her. Proof that you are the one who continues me. When I walked out of that house that day, I did not know it would be the last time we spoke, but I carried that promise back to Denver like a holy order. Now, sitting in this sterile hotel room, thinking about the empty safety deposit box and the new sneakers on my brother's feet, the rage was finally overtaking the grief. My mother thought she was dealing with the daughter who used to cry over her calculus homework. She thought she was dealing with the girl who stayed silent to keep the peace. She forgot that I was a woman who hunted discrepancies for a living. She forgot that I was the one person in the family who actually listened to Vivian Hart. I stood up and went to the bathroom to splash cold water on my face. I looked at myself in the mirror. I looked like my grandmother. I had her jawline. I had her eyes. Diane had spent my whole life telling me I was dramatic. She told me I overreacted. She told me I imagined unfairness where there was only love. Tomorrow morning, I was going to show her exactly what an overreaction looked like. I was going to start pulling the threads of this fresh start until the whole tapestry unraveled. I was done being the responsible daughter. It was time to be the forensic auditor of their lies. I went back to the main room and opened my laptop again. I logged into a people search database I used for work. It was a paid service, far more detailed than anything available to the public. I typed in a name, Sienna Miller, my brother's girlfriend, the one with the debt, the one with the new smile. If my mother had sold that ring, there was a paper trail. There is always a paper trail. And if they used the money to pay off a debt, that money had to move. Cash is heavy. Wire transfers are permanent. I cracked my knuckles. The sadness was gone. The hunt had begun. The formal reading of the will took place the following morning at 10 o'clock in the law offices of Sterling Associates. The conference room smelled of lemon polish and old paper. My mother, Diane, sat at the head of the mahogany table, dressed in a somber black dress that I recognized from the rack of a high-end department store. She had clearly bought it for the funeral, an investment piece for her role as the grieving widow. Ethan sat to her right, fidgeting with his tie, looking like a schoolboy waiting for the principal. Sienna had not been invited into the room, a small mercy for which I was grateful, though I knew she was waiting in the lobby. Scrolling through Instagram, Mr. Sterling, a man with graying temples and a voice like dry leaves, opened the thick folder in front of him. He adjusted his glasses and began to read. The preamble was standard debts to be paid, taxes to be filed. Then came the distribution of assets. The house went to my mother. The modest life insurance policy went to my mother. Then, he cleared his throat and looked directly at me. Article 4, Section B, he read. To my granddaughter, Charlotte Redmond, I leave my 3-carat European cut diamond ring. I leave this specific item to her, so she never forgets her own worth. The room went silent. Hearing Grandma Vivian's voice through the lawyer's dry delivery felt like a physical blow. So she never forgets her own worth. It was her final act of protection, a verbal shield she had cast forward in time. I looked at Diane. She was dabbing her eyes with a tissue, nodding slowly as if she agreed profoundly with the sentiment. It was a masterclass in performance. Thank you, Mr. Sterling, I said, my voice steady. Since that item is a specific bequest and separate from the residual estate, I would like to take possession of it today. I assume it is in the firm's safe or available for transfer. Mr. Sterling looked toward my mother. Mrs. Redmond, I believe you mentioned you had secured the personal effects. Diane did not miss a beat. She lowered the tissue, her face a mask of tragic responsibility. Oh, Charlotte, honey, I told you yesterday, it is being appraised and cleaned. We cannot just hand it over until the insurance value is updated for the transfer. We have to make sure everything is documented properly for the probate court. You know how sticky these things can get if the paperwork does not clear first. She looked at Mr. Sterling for validation. Right, Arthur. We need to wait for the inventory to be certified before we start handing out expensive jewelry. Mr. Sterling nodded vaguely. It is prudent to have the inventory list finalized. Yes, though specific bequests usually expedite. Exactly, Diane interrupted, her voice sweet but firm. We are just dotting the I's and crossing the T's. It is already secured. Charlotte, do not worry. It is safe. I knew she was lying. I knew the safety deposit box was empty. I knew the cleaning story was a fabrication. But I also knew that if I called her a liar right there in the conference room, without hard evidence, she would dissolve into tears and paint me as the cruel, impatient daughter harassing her grieving mother. Mr. Sterling would see a family squabble, not a theft. Fine, I said. When can I expect the inventory list? I am working on it, Diane said quickly. It takes time. Charlotte, there are so many spoons and linens to count. The meeting adjourned 20 minutes later. Diane swept out of the room with Ethan trailing behind her like a puppy. I stayed back, pretending to organize my purse. Once they were through the glass doors and into the lobby where Sienna was waiting, I turned back to Mr. Sterling. Mr. Sterling, I said. My mother mentioned the inventory takes time, but Grandma had a very organized estate. Has the preliminary inventory been submitted? Mr. Sterling sighed, removing his glasses. Charlotte, I will be honest. Your mother requested an extension on the inventory submission yesterday. She cited emotional distress. An extension, I asked. For how long? 60 days, he said. My stomach dropped. 60 days was not time to count spoons. 60 days was time to hide a paper trail. 60 days was time to repurchase a pawned item, or to manufacture a story about a burglary. I see, I said. I would like to formally request that a copy of the inventory be emailed to me the second it is filed. And Mr. Sterling, if that ring is not listed on the final inventory as being in the estate's possession, I will be filing a contest. His eyebrows shot up. Let us hope it does not come to that. Charlotte. I walked out to the parking lot. The sun was glaring off the asphalt. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was Ethan. I looked across the lot. He was sitting in the passenger seat of Mom's car, watching me. He was calling me from 50 feet away. I answered. What is it, Ethan? Hey, Char, he said. His voice was too casual, too bright. Just checking in. That was heavy in there. Right, Mom is really broken up about the ring quote. Grandma really loved you. What do you want, Ethan? I asked, walking toward my rental car. Whoa, chill. I am just saying, we are family. We should stick together. He paused. I could hear him breathing. Listen, since you are in town, I was thinking, I have this business idea, a really solid one this time. Sienna's uncle knows a guy in logistics. I just need a little capital to buy into the LLC. Since you are doing so well at that fancy firm in Denver, do you have any savings you are not using, just sitting there? I stopped walking. Savings I am not using. Yeah, like $5,000. I would pay you back in 3 months, with interest. Ethan, I said, staring at his silhouette in the car. Grandma has been dead for 3 weeks. You are wearing $400 shoes, and you are asking me for $5,000. The shoes were a gift, he snapped, his tone flipping instantly from charm to aggression. God, you count every penny. You are just like Dad was. Forget it. He hung up. I watched him throw his phone onto the dashboard. I drove back to my mother's house, not because I wanted to, but because I needed to see the dynamic in action. I needed to see the crime scene. When I entered the kitchen, the atmosphere had shifted. Sienna was standing at the stove, stirring a pot of soup. She was wearing one of my mother's aprons. Hey, Charlotte, she chirped. Mom is resting. I told her I would handle lunch. She is just so exhausted. Mom, She called her mom. I had known Sienna for 2 years, and she had always called her Mrs. Redmond. Now, suddenly, she had been promoted. "That is nice of you," I said, leaning against the doorframe. My eyes scanned the room. There were no new boxes. No shipping labels visible in the trash can. Diane had likely cleared the evidence I had spotted yesterday. "We just want to help her," Sienna said, lowering her voice to a conspiratorial whisper. "Ethan and I feel so bad that she has to deal with all this paperwork. We told her we would handle the heavy lifting." "I bet you did," I said. Diane walked in then, looking refreshed. Her makeup touched up. "Oh, smells delicious. Sienna," she said, ignoring me. "You are such an angel." "Mom," I said, cutting through the saccharine display. "I need to talk to you about the inventory." Diane stiffened. "Not now. Charlotte, we are about to eat." "Now," I said. "Mr. Sterling told me you asked for a 60-day delay. Why?" She turned on me, her eyes flashing. "Because I am grieving my mother just died. Can I not have a moment to breathe without you demanding spreadsheets?" "It is not about spreadsheets," I said calmly. "It is about the ring. If it is being cleaned, you must have a receipt from the jeweler, a drop-off slip, something. Just show me the slip, and I will drop it." The room went deadly silent. Sienna stopped stirring the soup. Ethan appeared in the doorway, crossing his arms. "Why are you pushing this?" Diane hissed. She took a step toward me. "Do you think I am a thief? Is that it? You think your own mother stole from you?" "I think you are hiding something," I said. "And I think you are using grief as a shield." "Get out," Diane said. She pointed a trembling finger at the door. "If you are going to accuse me in my own house, you can leave. You care more about that stone than you do about this family." "That stone was a bequest," I said, "and gaslighting me will not make it appear." I turned and walked out. I did not slam the door. I closed it firmly. I got into my rental car and drove to a coffee shop 3 miles away. My hands were not shaking this time. I was in work mode. I opened my laptop and connected to the Wi-Fi. I started building a timeline. Date of death, date of will reading, date of safety deposit box access. I was deep in a spreadsheet when my phone pinged with an email notification. It was my personal email address, the one I used for bills and official correspondence, not the one I gave out to retailers. I clicked on the notification. Subject: Welcome to the Lark Lumen family. Dear Charlotte, thank you for visiting us. We are thrilled to welcome you to our client list. As a new customer, we want to ensure you stay up to date with our exclusive offers. I stared at the screen. The logo was elegant, a stylized bird holding a lantern. Lark Lumen Jewelers. I had never been to Lark Lumen. I had never heard of Lark Lumen. I clicked the "Why am I receiving this" link at the bottom. The automated text popped up. "You are receiving this email because you made a transaction or consignment with us on September 22nd. September 22nd. That was last week. That was the day after the funeral. Someone had walked into that store. Someone had conducted a transaction. And someone had used my name and my email address to do it. My mother had not just sold the ring. She had consigned it under my name to make it look like I had authorized it. She had forged my identity to cover her tracks. I took a screenshot of the email. Then I forwarded it to my work server, creating a time-stamped backup. Lark Lumen, I whispered to the empty coffee shop. I typed the name into the search bar. Lark Lumen Jewelers, St. Louis, Consignment, Estate Jewelry, Vintage Specialists. They were located in an upscale shopping district 20 minutes from my mother's house. I looked at the time. It was 2 p.m. They were open until 6. I closed my laptop. The creeping dread was gone, replaced by the cold, hard hum of pursuit. I did not need to ask my mother for the receipt anymore. I had the digital footprint. I stood up, threw my empty coffee cup in the trash, and walked out to the car. I was going shopping. Before I drove to the jewelry store, I needed to make one stop. The email from Lark and Lumen was a digital smoking gun, but I wanted physical corroboration. I wanted to see the look on my mother's face one more time before I pulled the trigger on the legal process. I turned my rental car around and headed back toward the house. It was 3 in the afternoon on a Wednesday. My mother would be home. She was always home at this hour, watching her daytime talk shows, likely sipping iced tea and feeling pleased with her performance at the will reading. I did not knock. I still had my key, a relic from a life I no longer lived. I slid it into the lock and pushed the door open. The house was quiet. The television was murmuring from the den, the sound of a studio audience applauding some trivial revelation. I walked into the kitchen. It was empty, but the trash can under the sink was pulled slightly out, as if someone had hastily thrown something away and failed to close the cabinet properly. My eyes, trained to spot the anomaly in a row of perfect data, locked onto it instantly. Protruding from the top of the garbage was a piece of cardboard. It was a shipping box, torn apart with force, the edges jagged. I walked over and pulled it out. It was a small, reinforced box, the kind used for high-value shipping. The return label had been peeled off, but not completely. A strip of the adhesive remained, and on it, printed in elegant, metallic navy font, was a partial logo, Arc Lou, and the word consignment. My heart hammered a slow, heavy rhythm against my ribs. Here was the physical link. My mother had not just visited the store. She had been receiving correspondence or packaging from them at her home address. Charlotte? I turned. Diane was standing in the doorway of the kitchen, clutching her robe. Her face went pale when she saw the cardboard in my hand. She took a quick, shallow breath, her eyes darting from the box to my face. "I thought you went back to your hotel," she said, her voice tight. "I forgot something," I said, holding up the torn cardboard. "What is this? Mom?" She blinked, her mind racing visibly behind her eyes. That is just, I ordered some earrings. For the funeral, I decided not to wear them. From a consignment shop, I asked. The label says consignment. It is just a store. Charlotte, she snapped, walking over and snatching the box from my hand. She shoved it back into the trash can with unnecessary violence. "Why are you digging through my garbage? You are acting paranoid." "I am not digging," I said calmly. "It was sticking out, just like your story." "I do not have to explain my shopping habits to you," she said, turning her back to me to fill a glass of water. Her hand was shaking. The bandage on her finger was still there, a stark reminder of the physical struggle she likely had opening that very box. "Please leave. You are upsetting me. Ethan is coming over later, and I do not want bad energy in the house." "Right," I said. "We would not want to upset Ethan." I looked at her one last time. She refused to meet my eyes. She was staring out the window at the bird feeder. Her shoulders hunched in a defensive posture. She looked small. She looked guilty. And for a fleeting second, I felt a pang of pity. But then I remembered the empty safety deposit box, and the pity evaporated like mist. "Goodbye, Mom," I said. I walked out. I had what I needed from her. Now I needed the paper trail. I drove straight to the office of Sterling and Associates. I did not have an appointment, but I did not need one. I was a beneficiary of the estate, and I had rights. The receptionist looked up, surprised, as I walked in with a stride that suggested I owned the building. "I need to see Mr. Sterling," I said. Briefly. "He is in a meeting," she began. "Then I will wait," I said, taking a seat. "But while I wait, I need a copy of every single document my mother has submitted to this office regarding the estate assets. The will grants me the right to review the administration." The receptionist hesitated, then picked up the phone. A moment later, a paralegal appeared, looking flustered. She handed me a manila folder. "Mr. Sterling said you can review the file," she said. "He apologizes for the delay on the inventory." "Thank you," I said. I opened the folder right there in the waiting room. I flipped past the death certificate, the initial petition for probate, and the tax forms. Then I found it. It was a single sheet of paper, scanned and printed. The header read, Authorization to liquidate personal property. The date on the document was September 22nd, the day after the funeral. The item listed was 1 platinum ring, 3-carat diamond, European cut, and at the bottom of the page, above the line for beneficiary consent, was a signature. Charlotte Redmond. I stared at it. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. It was my name. It was my spelling. But it was not my hand. I have always signed my name with a sharp, vertical slant. My C is angular. My T's are crossed with a short, precise line. This signature was looped. The C was round and bulbous. The T's were crossed with a long, flowing flourish. It was the signature of someone trying to copy my style but unable to suppress their own muscle memory. It was my mother's handwriting, dressed up in a costume of mine. I felt a cold rage settle in my gut. This was a felony, forgery, fraud. She had signed my name to sell my heritage, and she had filed it with a lawyer to make it look legal. I took my phone out and photographed the document in high resolution. Then I looked at the header again. Authorized Agent Lark Lumen Jewelers. I handed the folder back to the paralegal. Thank you, I said. That is all I needed. I walked back to my car. It was time to make the call. I sat in the driver's seat, the air conditioning blasting against my face. I needed to know if the ring was still there, or if it was already gone. I dialed the number for Lark and Lumen. Lark and Lumen, this is Sarah speaking. How may I assist you? The voice was polished, professional. Hi, I said, pitching my voice to be casual, unthreatening. I am calling about a piece that might have come into your shop recently, an estate piece, from a Mrs. Vivian Hart. There was a pause, a long, heavy silence stretched over the line. I could hear the faint sound of jazz music playing in the background of the store. I am sorry, Sarah said, her voice suddenly tight. We do not discuss client transactions over the phone. Are you the consignor? I am the owner, I said. Another silence. This one was shorter, sharper. One moment, please. The line clicked onto hold. Classical music played for 30 seconds. Then Sarah came back. Ma'am, the manager says we cannot provide any information without the consignor present. You would need to come in. I see, I said. Thank you, Sarah. I hung up. They did not say, we do not have it. They did not say, wrong number. They went into defensive mode. They checked with a manager. That meant the file was flagged. That meant they knew there was a problem with the Vivian Hart ring. I put the car in drive. The store was 15 minutes away. Lark and Lumen was located in Clayton, the upscale business district of St. Louis. The storefront was intimidating black marble, gold lettering, and a security guard standing discreetly by the glass doors. It was the kind of place where you had to buzz to be let in. I parked the rental car and checked my reflection in the rearview mirror. I did not look like a victim. I looked like a risk compliance officer. I wore my blazer like armor. I walked to the door and pressed the buzzer. The lock clicked. I stepped inside. The air was frigid and smelled of expensive lilies, the same scent as the funeral. I noted with a grim sense of irony, the lighting was low, designed to make the diamonds in the cases sparkle with maximum brilliance. There were only 2 other customers in the store, a couple looking at engagement rings in hushed tones. A man in a sharp charcoal suit stepped out from behind a counter. He was in his late 40s, balding, with a smile that did not quite reach his eyes. Good afternoon, he said smoothly. Welcome to Lark and Lumen. I am Graham Pell, the owner. How can we help you today? I walked up to him, stopping exactly 3 feet away. I did not smile. Mr. Pell, I said. My name is Charlotte Redmond. His smile faltered for a fraction of a second. It was a microscopic twitch at the corner of his mouth, but I saw it. He knew the name. He had seen it on the forged document. Miss Redmond, he said, recovering his composure. A pleasure. What brings you in? I am here about an estate item that was sold to your store without consent, I said. My voice was not loud, but in the quiet store, it carried like a gunshot. The couple looking at engagement rings looked up. The security guard shifted his weight. Mr. Pell's face went rigid. He glanced at the other customers, then back at me. I think there must be a misunderstanding. We have strict intake protocols. I am sure you do, I said, which is why I am confused as to how you accepted a 3-carat European cut diamond from a woman who is not Charlotte Redmond, using a document with a forged signature. Mr. Pell's tan seemed to fade. He gestured toward the back of the store. Miss Redmond, he said, his voice dropping to a whisper. Why don't we step into my office? I would be happy to discuss this in private. Can I get you a coffee or sparkling water? No coffee, I said. Just the office. He led the way. We walked past cases of glittering gems, past the silent judgment of the security guard, and into a hallway lined with framed certificates of authenticity. He opened a heavy oak door at the end of the hall. The office was plush, with a large mahogany desk and a wall of monitors displaying the security feeds. He gestured for me to sit, but I remained standing. Now, he said, closing the door and leaning against it, you use some very strong words out there. Forgery, consent. These are serious accusations. They are accurate accusations, I replied. I have the document my mother submitted to the estate lawyer. I know she brought the ring here on September 22nd. I know she signed my name. Your mother, Mr. Pell asked, feigning ignorance, the lady who brought the piece in. She claimed she had power of attorney. Did you verify it? I asked. Did you check her ID against the name on the ring's appraisal? Because the ring belongs to Charlotte Redmond, and the woman who sold it is Diane Redmond. Mr. Pell sighed, walking around his desk. He looked tired. Look, family disputes are messy. We try to stay out of them. We process the item in good faith. Where is the ring? I asked. It has been processed, he said vaguely. It is in the system. Processed could mean sold, I said. It could mean melted down. It could mean shipped to a buyer in Hong Kong. I need to know where it is. He hesitated. His eyes flicked to the monitor wall behind me. I turned to look. The screen was divided into 16 squares, showing various angles of the store, but one square, in the bottom right corner, was frozen. It was a still image, likely paused for review or tagged in the system. It was a shot from the intake counter camera. The date stamp in the corner read 09/22/2025. The time was 14:30. In the frame, my mother was standing at the counter. She was wearing her black funeral dress. She looked anxious, her head turned slightly as if checking the door, and in her hand, resting on the velvet counterpad, was the box. The box was open. Inside, unmistakable even on the grainy monitor, was the ring, the heavy platinum setting, the large, old-fashioned cut of the diamond, and standing next to my mother, barely visible at the edge of the frame but distinct enough to identify, was a man. He was leaning in, pointing at the document she was signing. It was Mr. Pell. I turned back to him. He was watching me look at the screen. The polite veneer was gone. He looked trapped. That is my mother, I said, pointing at the screen. And that is you. You knew she was anxious. You knew she was rushing, and you took it anyway. She said it was urgent, Mr. Pell said, his voice thin. She said the family needed the money immediately, for debts. She was right about the debts, I said. But she was wrong about the ownership. I pulled out my phone. I am going to need a copy of that footage, Mr. Pell, and I'm going to need the transaction record, now. He stared at me, calculating the risk. And if I say no, then I walk out of here and I file a police report for receipt of stolen property, I said. And I name you as an accessory. I work in compliance. Mr. Pell, I know exactly how to trigger an audit that will freeze your inventory for months. He paled. He knew I was not bluffing. He reached for the mouse on his desk. I can give you the intake form, he said quietly. But the ring is gone. Miss Redmond, it was sold 3 days ago. To whom? I cannot release buyer information, he said. Then you are going to get it back, I said, because if you don't, I am not just coming for the ring. I am coming for your business license." I stood there, the silence stretching between us, the image of my mother selling my birthright frozen on the screen behind me. I had found the receipt. I had found the footage. The mystery was over. Now, the war began. I walked out of Lark and Lumen with a folder of photocopied documents tucked under my arm. The sun was setting, casting long, bruised shadows across the parking lot. I had the evidence of the act, the forged signature, the intake form, the video still of my mother, but I was missing the motive. My mother was many things controlling, anxious, favoring, but she was not a thief by nature. She was a woman who followed rules, who worried about what the neighbors thought. For her to commit a felony, the pressure must have been catastrophic. I sat in my car and opened my laptop. I did not go back to the hotel. I could not sit in that silent room. I needed answers now. I navigated to the Missouri Case Net System. It is a public database for state court records. If there was a legal fire big enough to make my mother burn her relationship with me, it would be listed there. I typed in Redmond. Ethan, nothing new, just the old traffic violations. Then I typed in Miller. Sienna. The screen populated instantly. Apex Financial Services vs. Sienna Miller. Judgment entered August 15, 2025. Type, garnishment of wages, amount outstanding, $32,418. I stared at the screen. $32,000. It was a significant amount, but it was not life-ending. It was the kind of debt you consolidated or worked out a payment plan for. It was not the kind of debt that required stealing an heirloom from a dead woman, unless you were terrified. I drove to my parents' house. The fresh start. Ethan and Sienna were celebrating suddenly looked very different. It was not a fresh start. It was a bailout. When I arrived, the house was fully lit. I could see silhouettes moving in the living room. I walked in without knocking. They were all there. Diane was sitting in her armchair, staring at nothing. Ethan was pacing. Sienna was on the sofa, biting her nails. The air in the room was thick, like the moments before a thunderstorm breaks. "Charlotte," Ethan said, stopping mid-stride. He looked annoyed, but beneath the annoyance, there was fear. "We thought you were done." "I am not done," I said, tossing the folder onto the coffee table. It landed with a heavy slap. "I went to the store. I saw the video. I know about the judgment. Sienna." Sienna flinched physically, pulling her knees up to her chest. "You know," she whispered. $32,000, I said. "Wage garnishment. That is why you needed the cash right now. That is why you could not wait for probate." "She made a mistake," Ethan cut in, stepping between me and his girlfriend. His voice was defensive, loud. "She got involved with some bad loan terms. The interest ballooned. They were going to take her entire paycheck. Charlotte, she would have lost her car. She would have lost her job. So you stole my ring," I said. "We had to fix it," Ethan shouted. "We are a family. That is what families do. We help each other when we are drowning." I looked at my mother. She had not moved. She was gripping the armrests of her chair so hard her knuckles were white. "Mom," I said, "you know wage garnishment is civil, right? It is just money. You pay it off over time." Diane looked up at me. Her eyes were red, rimmed with dark circles. "He told me they were going to arrest her," she said softly. I froze. "What?" "Ethan," Diane said, her voice trembling. "Ethan told me that if we did not pay the full amount by the 25th, the collectors were going to file fraud charges. He said Sienna would go to jail." I looked at my brother. He refused to meet my eyes. He looked at the floor, his jaw working. "Is that true, Ethan?" I asked, my voice deadly calm. "Did you tell Mom that Sienna was going to prison for a credit debt?" I might have exaggerated," he mumbled, "but it felt like prison. The stress was killing us." "You lied," I said. "You lied to terrify her so she would liquidate the only asset available. You made her a criminal to save yourself the inconvenience of a payment plan." "It was not just inconvenience," Ethan yelled. "They were calling her work. It was embarrassing. Embarrassing, I repeated. So to save you from embarrassment, I lose the one thing Grandma left me. A ring is just a thing, Diane suddenly cried out. She stood up, her face twisted in anguish. It is a piece of carbon, Charlotte. Your brother's future is a life. His reputation is a life. How can you compare a stone to a human being? Because that stone was a promise, I said. And you broke it? Your grandmother did not understand how the world works, Diane snapped. The venom in her voice shocked me. She lived in a fairy tale. She thought a ring could save you. Well, in the real world, cash saves you. And I did what a mother has to do. She understood exactly how the world works, I said. She told me you would do this. She warned me specifically that you would burn everything down to keep him warm. We did not have a choice, Sienna blurted out from the sofa. I turned to her. What did you say? We did not have a choice, she repeated, her voice shaking. Then she saw the look on my face and quickly corrected herself. I mean, your mom did not have a choice. We were desperate. We? I said. You said we... I looked at the three of them, the triangle of dysfunction, Ethan the manipulator, Sienna the catalyst, and Diane the executioner. You were in on it, I said to Sienna. You knew she was taking it. You probably drove her there. I sat in the car, Sienna whispered, looking down. Get out, I said. This is my house, Diane screamed. I am talking to my brother and his girlfriend, I said. I am done talking to you for tonight. I picked up the folder. I have everything I need. I have the court records. I have the intake form. And now I have the confession. I walked out to my car. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from adrenaline. I sat in the driver's seat and turned on the dome light. I opened the folder again. I needed to look at the timeline one more time. The intake form from Lark and Lumen was dated September 22nd. The time was 2:30 in the afternoon. I pulled out the call logs Graham Pell had reluctantly printed for me after I threatened his license. On September 23rd, the day after the ring was dropped off, there were 5 calls from my mother's cell phone to the store. 09:15 a.m., duration 2 minutes. 10:30 a.m., duration 1 minute 11, 45 a.m., duration 4 minutes, 1:20 p.m., duration 1 minute 03:00 p.m., duration 12 minutes. They were harassing the store. They were desperate. Is it sold yet? Do you have the money? That explained why the sale price listed on the final receipt was so low. The ring was appraised at $25,000. It was sold for $12,000. Less than half its value. They had rushed it. They had panicked and forced a fire sale to meet a deadline that Ethan had fabricated. They threw away $13,000 of value just to get the cash 24 hours faster. I felt a wave of nausea. It was not just theft. It was incompetent theft. It was a waste of history, a waste of value, a waste of trust. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Graham Pell, the store owner, Miss Redmond. I have been thinking about our conversation. I want to offer you a piece of advice, off the record. I stared at the screen. If you push this, people you love will get hurt. Financially, socially, the legal system is a blunt instrument. Once you start it, you cannot stop it. Are you sure? I looked at the house. I could see my mother pacing in the window. I could see Ethan gesturing wildly. Was I sure they had lied to me? They had stolen from me. They had gaslit me. And they had done it all while standing on my grandmother's grave. I typed back a single word. Yes, I put the car in gear. I was done with the emotional investigation. It was time for the strategic execution. Graham Pell was worried about the legal system being a blunt instrument. He did not realize that I did not intend to use a blunt instrument. I intended to use a scalpel, and I was going to start by cutting out the heart of the problem, the store itself. The morning after the confrontation in my mother's living room, I did not wake up with a headache. I woke up with a plan. The emotional part of my brain, the part that still wanted to be the good daughter, had finally gone quiet. In its place, the professional risk analyst had taken over. I sat in a quiet corner of a coffee shop in downtown Clayton, 3 blocks from Lark and Lumen, with my laptop open. I was not looking at family photos. I was looking at commercial real estate trends and business filings. If I was going to go to war with a business, I needed to know the terrain. It did not take long to find the cracks in the fortress. St. Louis, like many cities, had public records regarding commercial disputes. I dug into the court filings for the district. Lark and Lumen was not the impenetrable luxury vault it pretended to be. In the last 18 months, they had been named in 2 small claims suits regarding misrepresented gemstone quality. Both had been settled out of court, likely with non-disclosure agreements attached, but the real red flag was in the real estate records. The building that housed the store was owned by a holding company, and they had filed for a permit to remodel the space for a new tenant effective January 1st of next year. That was 4 months away. Lark and Lumen was losing its lease, or rather, they were being pushed out. I cross-referenced this with local business forums. There were rumors. Declining foot traffic, one user posted. Inventory looks stagnant, wrote another. Graham Pell was not running a thriving empire. He was captaining a sinking ship. That explained why he was willing to accept a high-value item from a desperate woman with shaky paperwork. He needed the commission. He needed the cash flow to keep the lights on for 1 more month. Armed with this knowledge, I made a phone call, not to the store, but to a specialist. I met Elena Vance at her office an hour later. Elena was an attorney who specialized in a very specific intersection of law estate disputes and consumer fraud. She was sharp, unsentimental, and expensive. I had worked with her firm on a compliance audit years ago in Denver, and she had agreed to see me as a professional courtesy. I laid the documents on her desk. The will, the forged authorization, the photo of the intake form. Elena reviewed them in silence. She pushed her glasses up her nose. "This is textbook conversion," she said, her voice dry. "Your mother committed forgery, the store committed negligence at best, and knowingly receiving stolen property at worst. If they knew the signature was off and took it anyway because the seller was distressed, that is predatory. I want the ring back," I said. "But more than that, I want to ensure they cannot bury the evidence before we get to court." "Then we do not start with a lawsuit," Elena said. "We start with a preservation notice. We put them in a legal stranglehold." She drafted the letter while I waited. It was a thing of beauty. It was not a threat. It was a command. It cited specific statutes requiring the preservation of all digital and physical records related to the transaction on September 22nd. This included closed-circuit television footage, audio logs, email correspondence, metadata from the inventory system, and the physical intake paperwork. "If they delete a single second of video after receiving this," Elena said, handing me the document to review, "it becomes spoliation of evidence. That turns a civil dispute into a criminal obstruction charge. They will not dare touch that delete button." "I will deliver it myself," I said. "Good." Elena nodded. "Watch his face when he reads it." I walked back to Lark and Lumen at noon. The store was empty of customers. The silence inside felt heavy, like the air in a room where an argument has just ended. Graham Pell was behind the counter, polishing a watch. When the door chime rang, he looked up, a professional smile plastering itself onto his face. It vanished the moment he saw me. "Miss Redmond," he said. His voice was tight. "I thought we concluded our business yesterday." "Not quite," I said. I placed the heavy cream envelope on the glass counter. "This is a formal preservation notice from my attorney. It requires you to secure and maintain all records regarding the intake and sale of the Vivian Hart estate ring. If any files are deleted, corrupted, or lost from this moment forward, you will be held personally liable for spoliation of evidence." Pell stared at the envelope. He did not pick it up. He looked at me, and for the first time, I saw genuine fear in his eyes. "Miss Redmond," he said, lowering his voice, "can we speak candidly?" "I am listening." "You are a professional woman," he said, leaning over the counter. "You understand that businesses have complexities. We have had some staff turnover recently, The intake desk has been a bit messy. New employees, training gaps. It is possible that procedural boxes were not checked as rigorously as I would like. Forgery is not a procedural box, I said. I am not admitting to forgery, he said quickly. I am saying that perhaps mistakes were made in verification, but dragging this into court, it helps no one. The ring is gone. The buyer wishes to remain anonymous. A lawsuit will take years. It will drain your resources. He paused, licking his lips. We would like to offer you a settlement, he said. I raised an eyebrow. A settlement? We can offer you store credit for the full appraised value of the ring, he said. $25,000. You can pick out anything in the store, a modern cut, perhaps something with better clarity. I do not want store credit, I said. Cash, then, he said, his desperation leaking through. We can do a partial cash settlement, $10,000 today, and the rest over 6 months, to compensate you for the administrative error. I looked at him. He was offering me money to go away. He was terrified. If this went to court, his messy intake procedures would be public record. His insurance premiums would skyrocket. His reputation would be destroyed, and if he was already losing his lease, a fraud lawsuit would be the final nail in the coffin. I do not want your money, Mr. Pell, I said. I want the truth. Who brought that ring in? He sighed, running a hand over his balding head. I told you, I cannot discuss client. Stop, I cut him off. You just offered me $10,000 to silence me. The client confidentiality ship has sailed. You know it was not me. You saw the signature. You saw the woman. He looked down at the counter. He looked at the preservation notice. He realized he was cornered. She was very persuasive, he said quietly. Persuasive how? She was crying, Pell admitted. She said her son was in trouble. She said she needed the money by 5 o'clock or... He trailed off. She seemed desperate, Miss Redmond. In this business, we see people at their lowest. Divorce, bankruptcy, death. When someone comes in shaking, holding a family heirloom, we try to help. You tried to help yourself to a 50% margin, I corrected him. You saw a woman who was too panicked to negotiate, and you bought a $25,000 ring for $12,000. You did not help her. You exploited her. He flinched. We take a risk on consignment. It is standard practice. And the signature, I asked. You saw her sign Charlotte Redmond. You checked her ID. Her ID says Diane Redmond. How did you reconcile that? Pell looked away. She said you were ill. She said she had power of attorney but had left the papers in the car. She promised to email them. We trusted her. You trusted that she would not get caught, I said. And you trusted that I would never find out. I tapped the envelope on the counter. Consider yourself served. Mr. Pell, do not delete the footage. I turned and walked out. As I walked back to my car, my mind was racing. Graham Pell was weak. He was financially unstable, legally exposed, and morally flexible. He was the perfect target, but a lawsuit would take time. Elena was right about that. Civil litigation could drag on for 18 months. By the time we got a judgment, Lark and Lumen might be bankrupt, the assets liquidated, and Graham Pell might be managing a pawn shop in another state. I needed a faster solution. I needed total control. I sat in my car and opened my laptop again. I went back to the business listings I'd been scanning earlier. I filtered my search. Jewelry, St. Louis, for sale, confidential listings. There were a dozen results. Most were small kiosks or repair shops, but one listing stood out. It had no name, just a description. Established luxury jewelry boutique for sale, Clayton District, high-value inventory, turnkey operation, owner retiring, relocating, motivated seller, price reduced. I clicked on the financial details. Asking price $450,000. Includes all inventory, fixtures, and brand intellectual property. $450,000. It was a lot of money, but it was not impossible money. I had been working in high-level finance risk for 10 years. I lived in an apartment that cost half of what I could afford. I drove a 5-year-old car. I maxed out my investments every year. And last year, when Brightwell Analytics Group was acquired by a larger firm, I had received a retention bonus and a payout on my equity shares. I checked my accounts. Between my liquid savings, my investment portfolio which I could borrow against, and the bonus check I had parked in a high-yield account, I had access to exactly $520,000. I stared at the number. If I sued Graham Pell, I might get the value of the ring back in 2 years. If I bought the store, I would own the store immediately. If I owned the store, I would own the surveillance system. I would own the intake records. I would own the email server. I would own the legal entity that sold the ring. I could compel the buyer to return the item because the sale was fraudulent, and as the owner, I could facilitate that reversal without fighting a hostile management. And more importantly, I would hold the keys to the kingdom that my family had tried to use to destroy me. My mother had sold my inheritance to this store. There was a poetic justice in me buying the store to get it back. I called Elena Vance. "Charlotte," she answered, "did you deliver the letter?" "I did," I said. "But I have a new question for you." "Go ahead." "If I wanted to purchase a business that is currently holding stolen property, how quickly can we close if I make a cash offer?" There was a long silence on the other end of the line. "Charlotte," Elena said slowly, "are you talking about Lark and Lumen?" "It is listed for sale," I said. Quietly, "Pell is drowning. He wants out. If I offer him a clean exit, he will take it." "That is aggressive," Elena said. I could hear the smile in her voice. "And brilliant. If you own the entity, you own the liability, yes, but you also control the evidence. You stop being the plaintiff and start being the boss." "Exactly," I said. "Can you draft a letter of intent?" "I can have it ready in an hour," she said. "But Charlotte, if you do this, you are not just getting a ring back, you are entering the jewelry business." "I am not entering the jewelry business," I said, looking at the Lark and Lumen sign through my windshield. "I am entering the demolition business." "I will start drafting," Elena said. I hung up the phone. I looked at the store one last time. Graham Pell thought he was having a bad week. He had no idea that he was about to be bought out by the very woman he tried to bribe. I started the car engine. The chessboard had just changed. I was no longer a pawn. I was the player moving the pieces. And I was about to capture the queen. To the outside world, and certainly to my family, I was simply Charlotte, the risk analyst. I drove a 5-year-old sedan. I lived in a 1-bedroom apartment in a neighborhood that was practical rather than trendy. I bought my clothes off the rack during sales. My mother often made backhanded compliments about my frugal nature, implying that I lacked the taste or the means to live a larger life. What they did not know, what I had intentionally never told them, was that silence is expensive, but freedom is priceless. For 10 years, I had maximized every tax-advantaged account available to me. I invested 50% of my take-home pay into index funds, and 18 months ago, when Brightwell Analytics Group was acquired by a global financial conglomerate, my equity package vested. It was a quiet exit, handled with non-disclosure agreements and wire transfers. I did not buy a new car. I did not go to Europe. I simply watched the number in my brokerage account swell to a figure that meant I never had to take abuse from anyone ever again. I had $500,000 in liquid capital available within 24 hours. My family thought money was for flashing. I knew money was for leverage. The morning after I served Graham Pell with the preservation notice, I met Elena Vance at her office. We spent 2 hours drafting the paperwork. We formed a limited liability company named Redmond Holdings. It was a clean, generic name. To the casual observer, it looked like just another investment vehicle. To me, it was the flagship of my retaliation. "Are you sure about this, Charlotte?" Elena asked, tapping her pen on the desk. "You are sinking a huge chunk of your net worth into a failing retail business in a dying mall." "I am not buying a retail business," I corrected her. "I am buying a crime scene, and I am buying the silence of the only witness." "Graham Pell is going to be suspicious," she warned. Graham Pell is going to be relieved, I said. He is drowning. I am just throwing him a rope. He does not need to know that the rope is actually a noose. I walked into Lark and Lumen at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. The store was even emptier than before. The air conditioning was humming too loudly, a sign that the system was aging and needed maintenance. Graham Pell was sitting behind the counter, staring at a tablet, looking like a man who had not slept in a week. When he saw me, his shoulders slumped. He clearly expected another threat, another lawyer, or the police. "Miss Redmond," he said, his voice flat. "I assume you are here to reject my settlement offer." "I am," I said, placing my handbag on the counter. "I do not want your $10,000, Mr. Pell, and I do not want your store credit." "Then what do you want?" he asked, rubbing his temples. "Blood, because I do not have any left." "I want the keys," I said. He blinked, confusion crinkling his forehead. "The keys to what?" "The keys to the store," I said calmly. "I know you are listed for sale. I know your lease is up for renewal, and the landlord is hiking the rent. I know you are facing 2 potential lawsuits for consumer fraud, plus mine. You are looking at bankruptcy within the quarter." His face went pale. "How do you—" "I am an analyst," I said. "It is my job to know." I reached into my bag and pulled out a blue folder. I slid it across the glass. "This is a letter of intent to purchase," I said. "Full asset acquisition of Lark and Lumen Jewelers, inventory, fixtures, brand, and records. All of it." He stared at the folder as if it were a bomb. "You want to buy the store? I am offering you a clean exit," I said. "I pay off your business debts. I take over the lease. You walk away with your personal credit intact and enough cash to retire or start over somewhere else. In exchange, you sign a full cooperation agreement regarding the transition of ownership." He laughed, a short, nervous sound. "You buy this place, Miss Redmond. With all due respect, this is a $500,000 operation. You are a compliance officer." "Open the folder," I said. He hesitated, then flipped the cover open. The first page was a proof of funds letter from my bank, certified that morning. He read the number, $450,000, verified, liquid, ready to wire. He looked up at me, his eyes wide. The arrogance evaporated, replaced by the sheer shock of seeing a woman he had underestimated suddenly towering over him financially. "You have this kind of capital," he whispered. "I do," I said, "and I'm willing to wire it to your escrow agent within 48 hours, but there is a condition." "Which is my total discretion," I said. "Nobody knows who the buyer is until the ink is dry. Not your staff, not your landlord, and certainly not my family." He licked his lips. He was looking at the number again. He was doing the math in his head, freedom versus ruin. "If I sell to you," he asked slowly, "what happens to the preservation notice? What happens to the fraud allegation?" "If I own the company," I said, "I can hardly sue myself, can I?" "The dispute becomes an internal matter." I saw the tension leave his body. It was physical. His shoulders dropped 3 inches. He saw the lifeboat. "I need to have my lawyer look at this," he said, but his hand was already resting possessively on the folder. "You have 24 hours, I said. "After that, the offer expires, and I go back to filing the lawsuit." I walked out of the store. I did not look back. I knew he would sign. He had no choice. By the time I got back to my hotel, the rumors had started. St. Louis society is a small, incestuous pond, and ripples travel fast. I had not told anyone, but Graham Pell must have called his landlord or his broker, and someone had talked. My phone rang at 6 o'clock. It was my mother. I stared at the screen. I let it ring 4 times before answering. "Hello, Mom. What are you doing?" she screamed. There was no preamble, no greeting, just pure, high-pitched panic. "I am having dinner," I said, picking up a menu from the room service table. "Do not play games with me. Charlotte," she yelled. Mrs. Higgins at the bank told me she saw a credit check on you, and now I hear from Sienna that you were seen walking into that jewelry store again. What are you doing?" "I am fixing the mess you made," I said. "Are you trying to destroy us?" Her voice broke into a sob, but it felt performative. "Are you trying to humiliate your brother if you sue that store? It will be in the papers. Everyone will know." "Nobody is suing anyone, Mom," I said calmly. "I am handling it privately." "Privately? You are acting like some vigilante. You need to stop. You need to come home and discuss this with the family." "I am done discussing," I said. "I'm trying to find what you stole. That is all." "I did not steal it," she shrieked. "I managed assets. I am the executor." "You are a forger," I said, "and I suggest you save your energy. You might need it later." I hung up. 5 minutes later, my phone rang again. It was Ethan. "Pick up the phone, Charlotte," he said the moment I answered. His voice was low, trying to sound menacing. "I just did," I said. "Mom is crying in the kitchen," he said. "You think you are so smart, don't you? Coming back here with your little corporate suit, thinking you can bully people." "I am not bullying anyone. Ethan, I am just conducting business." "You do not have the money to fight this," he sneered. "I know what you make. You are a mid-level manager. You are going to bankrupt yourself trying to prove a point." "Is that what you think?" I asked. "I know it," he said. Then, his tone shifted. The aggression slid away, replaced by a wheedling, oily charm that was even more repulsive. "Look, seriously, why are we fighting? If you have some extra cash, which I doubt, but if you do, why waste it on lawyers? I have this logistics thing I told you about. We could partner up, you and me, Redmond siblings. We could turn that money into something real." I almost laughed. It was pathetic. He was trying to grift me in the middle of threatening me. "I am not investing in your logistics scheme." "Ethan." "Fine," he exploded, the rage returning instantly. "Then go ahead, throw your money away. But do not think for a second that you are better than us. You are just jealous. You have always been jealous that Mom loves me more." "I know she loves you more," I said quietly. "That is why you are weak, and I am not." I blocked his number for the night. I opened my laptop and logged into social media. I did not post anything. I never posted anything. But I watched. Sienna had been busy. She had posted a photo of a stormy sky with a caption that was a masterclass in passive aggression. It's sad when toxic women can't let go of the past and want to drag everyone down with them. Some people just hate seeing others shine. Family drama moving. On positivity only beneath it, a dozen of her friends had commented with heart emojis and "Stay strong, babe," and "Ignore the haters." She was spinning the narrative. She was painting herself as the victim of a bitter sister-in-law. She was trying to win the court of public opinion because she knew she had already lost in the court of law. I did not comment. I did not react. I took a screenshot. Every post she made was proof of her mindset. Every lie she told publicly would make the truth land harder when it finally came out. They were handing me the rope, inch by inch. The next morning at 10 o'clock, I sat in the conference room of Graham Pell's attorney. The mood was somber. Graham looked like he was attending his own funeral, but he also looked relieved. The purchase agreement was on the table. It was a thick document, binding and absolute. "This transfers 100% of the membership interest in Lark and Lumen to Redmond Holdings, LLC, Graham's lawyer said. "Effective immediately upon wire confirmation." "And the records?" I asked. "All physical and digital records remain on the premises," the lawyer confirmed. "Mr. Pell has removed his personal effects only." Graham looked at me. "You are making a mistake," he said, but there was no conviction in his voice. "The retail market is brutal." "I am not worried about the retail market," I said. I picked up the pen. It was a heavy, expensive fountain pen. I signed my name. Charlotte Redmond, not the forged, looped version my mother had scrawled, but my signature, sharp, angular. Precise. I pushed the papers across the table. "Done," I said. My phone buzzed with a confirmation from my bank. The wire had been sent. $450,000 left my account. I stood up. Graham handed me a set of heavy brass keys. "The alarm code is 8149, he said. "I know," I said. "I will change it." I walked out of the office and into the bright sunlight of the St. Louis morning. I took a deep breath. The air tasted different. It tasted like ownership. I walked the 3 blocks to the store. I stood in front of the glass door. I saw the sign, Lark Lumen. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. The bell chimed, announcing my arrival to an empty room. I was not a customer anymore. I was not a claimant. I walked behind the counter. I ran my hand along the cool glass of the display case. I looked at the security monitors on the wall. I looked at the computer terminal where my mother's fraudulent transaction had been processed. I owned it all. I sat down in Graham Pell's chair, my chair. I spun it around to face the center of the room. My family thought they were fighting a sister who was visiting for a few days. They thought they were dealing with a temporary nuisance. They had no idea that I had just bought the battlefield. I picked up the phone on the desk and dialed the number for the store's IT security vendor. "This is Charlotte Redmond," I said. "I am the new owner of Lark and Lumen. I need to schedule a full forensic backup of all systems. Today?" The game was over. Now, the lesson began. The first thing I did as the owner of Lark and Lumen was lock the front door. I flipped the sign to closed, pulled the blinds, and turned the deadbolt. For the first time in 48 hours, the knot of anxiety in my chest loosened, replaced by the cold, heavy hum of absolute control. I was no longer Charlotte the grieving granddaughter or Charlotte the ignored sister. I was the CEO of the entity that held my family's fate in its servers. I sat down at the main terminal behind the intake counter. The chair was leather, worn smooth by Graham Pell's years of nervous shifting. I cracked my knuckles and logged in using the administrator credentials the IT vendor had reset for me 10 minutes ago. The store was silent, save for the rhythmic buzzing of the security drive backing up to my private cloud storage. I was not here to sell jewelry. I was here to conduct a forensic autopsy of a crime. I started with the inventory system. It was a proprietary database, clunky and outdated, but it logged every keystroke. I typed in the SKU number from the receipt I had found in the trash. Item number 74921. Description: platinum solitaire ring. 3.02 carats. European cut. Status: sold. I clicked on the History tab. This was where the story lived. The initial entry was created on September 22nd at 2:35 in the afternoon. The intake clerk, a user named Sarah J., had originally tagged the item as estate consignment, standard 30-day hold. That was standard procedure. You take an item in, you verify it, you clean it, you wait for the police check to clear. But 12 minutes later, there was an edit. User Graham P. Manager. Edit status changed to urgent liquidation. Note added. Client requests fast move. Waive holding period. Cash offer approved. I stared at the screen. Client requests fast move. That was the smoking gun of desperation. My mother had not just walked in to sell a ring. She had walked in begging for immediate cash. She had stripped away all bargaining power to get the money before the sun went down. I moved to the Documents tab. Here, scanned in high resolution, were the intake papers. I saw the forgery again, the looped Charlotte Redmond signature that mocked me. But this time, I saw something else. I opened the internal staff email server. I searched for the date of the transaction. I found an email from Sarah Jenkins to Graham Pell, sent at 2:40 in the afternoon, while my mother was likely still standing at the counter. Subject: concern regarding intake 74921. Graham. The ID provided Diane Redmond does not match the name on the appraisal or the intake form. Charlotte Redmond. The customer claims power of attorney but has not provided the document. The signature she just provided looks hesitant. Should we pause? Graham's reply came 2 minutes later. Reply. She is good for it. I know the family name. They are in distress. Process it. We need the inventory. We need the inventory. That was it. Graham Pell had overridden his own employee's fraud alert because he was greedy. He had knowingly facilitated the theft because he needed a high-ticket item on his books to show his own creditors. He was not a victim of my mother's lies. He was a co-conspirator. I printed the emails. That was my leverage against the store's insurance policy if I needed it later, but I needed to see it. I needed to see the betrayal in motion. I opened the security software. I pulled up the video file from September 22nd, camera 2, the wide angle that covered the entrance and the counter. I pressed play. The timestamp read 2:30 p.m. The door opened. My mother walked in. Seeing her on the screen, unaware she was being watched by the daughter she had betrayed, was a surreal experience. She looked terrible. Her hair was pulled back haphazardly. She was clutching her purse to her chest like a shield. She walked straight to the counter. Bypassing the displays, I could see her lips moving fast, her hands gesturing. She was manic. I switched to camera 3, the close-up on the register. I turned up the volume. The audio was grainy, but intelligible. "I just need it handled today." My mother's voice came through the speakers, tinny and strained. "My daughter. She is in the hospital, in Denver. I need to fly out tonight. I need the funds wired." I froze. She used me. She used a fake tragedy about me to explain why she was selling my property. She is in the hospital. It was a lie so effortless, so calculated to garner sympathy, that it made my stomach turn. Graham Pell nodded on screen. "I understand, Mrs. Redmond. We can expedite, but the price will reflect the speed." "I do not care," she said. "Just do it." She signed the paper. I watched her hand shake. I watched her look over her shoulder, and that was when I saw the detail that changed everything. In my initial view of the still image yesterday, I had focused on my mother, but now, watching the moving footage from the wide angle, I looked at the front door, standing just inside the glass, partially obscured by a display of pearl necklaces, was a figure. She was wearing sunglasses and a hoodie, but I knew the posture. I knew the way she held her phone. It was Sienna. She was not in the car. She was not waiting outside. She was inside the store. I zoomed in. She was holding her phone up, filming, or video calling. She was watching my mother. She was supervising the transaction. I checked the time on the video, 2:42 p.m. I picked up my phone and opened the call logs I had extracted from the store's records yesterday. I cross-referenced them with the video. At 2:42 p.m., the store's main line rang. On the video, Graham Pell picked up the phone while my mother was signing. He listened for a second, looked at the door where Sienna was standing, and then nodded. "Yes, Mr. Redmond," Graham said on the recording. "We are finalizing it now. The wire will be initiated within the hour. Mr. Redmond." Ethan. The triangle was complete. Sienna was the physical handler, standing guard to make sure Mom did not back out. Ethan was the remote enforcer, calling the store to pressure the owner. And Mom was the instrument, the one taking all the risk, signing the fraudulent papers while they pulled the strings. They had not just panicked, they had executed a coordinated operation. I felt a cold rage that was entirely different from the hurt I had felt days ago. This was not a family in crisis. This was a pack of wolves feeding on the weakest member, and that member had decided to feed on me. I saved the video clips. I backed them up to 3 different servers. Now, the final piece. Where was the ring? I went back to the inventory screen. I clicked on the sales tab. The ring had been sold on September 25th, 3 days after it came in. Buyer Lux Resale Global Limited. Address a distribution center in Chicago. I knew Lux Resale. They were a massive online aggregator. They bought estate jewelry in bulk from struggling stores, polished it, recertified it, and listed it on high-end websites for a 30% markup. This was good news. It meant the ring was likely sitting in a warehouse in Illinois, not on the finger of a tourist who had flown back to Dubai. It was recoverable. I noted the buyer's contact information. As the owner of Lark & Lumen, I could call them. I could tell them the item was sold in error due to an internal fraud issue. I could buy it back at cost, or simply demand its return pending the police investigation. I had the power to stop the chain of commerce. I sat back in the chair. the adrenaline slowly ebbing away. I had done it. I had the proof. I had the control. I looked down at the desk. There was a stack of paperwork, the physical file for the transaction. I picked it up. Inside was the intake form, the copy of my mother's ID, and the appraisal document she had brought in. It was the original appraisal from 1982. The paper was yellowed, the edges soft. I recognized the document. Grandma used to keep it in her fireproof box. I scanned the page, my eyes tracing the familiar description of the diamond. Color H, clarity VS1. Then I turned the page over. My mother, in her haste to turn the paper into cash, had clearly never looked at the back. She saw it as a ticket to a wire transfer. She did not see it as a letter, but there, in faint blue ballpoint pen, was my grandmother's handwriting. For Charlotte, I leaned in, my heart hammering against my ribs. If you are reading this, it means I am gone, and you have the ring. But the ring is just the symbol. The safety is in the iron. Below that was a series of numbers. 8, 2, 4, 9, Union Station Private Vaults, Box 104. I stared at the numbers. Union Station Private Vaults was a private, non-bank storage facility in downtown St. Louis. It was the kind of place that did not report to the probate court. It was the kind of place where you stored things you wanted to keep off the grid. Grandma had not just left me a ring. She had left me a secondary inheritance, a secret. And because Diane had been so focused on stealing the diamond to pay for Sienna's mistakes, she had handed the map to the real treasure right over to the jewelry store clerk. She had literally given away the key because she did not bother to turn the page. I ran my thumb over the ink. It was real. "Oh, Grandma," I whispered to the empty room. "You genius." I took a picture of the back of the appraisal. I folded the original document and put it in my purse. I checked the time. It was 5 o'clock. The sun was beginning to dip, casting long shadows through the blinds. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Elena Vance, my lawyer. "Update. I spoke to the reseller in Chicago. They have the item. They have placed a hold on it. We can initiate the recovery process tomorrow. Also, your mother has been calling my office demanding to know who filed the preservation notice. She sounds unhinged." I smiled, a cold, sharp smile. "Let her call." I typed back, "I'm closing up shop." I stood up and walked to the front of the store. I looked at the monitors one last time. I saw the ghost of my mother on the screen, selling my history for pennies. I turned off the lights. The store plunged into darkness. Save for the blinking green LEDs of the security system, I walked out, locking the door behind me with the heavy brass key. I had the ring located. I had the store. I had the evidence of their crime. And now, thanks to their own greed and carelessness, I had a lead on something else entirely. I walked to my car. I was not going back to the hotel. I was going to Union Station. But first, I needed to make sure the trap was fully set. I opened my phone and composed a text to Ethan. "I am done fighting. I am going back to Denver tomorrow. You win." I hit send. Let them think they had won. Let them think I had given up. Let them exhale. Because when the hammer finally dropped, I wanted them to be completely relaxed so they would not see it coming until it crushed them. I did not scream. I did not throw a wine glass against the wall. I did not drive to my mother's house and pound on the door demanding justice. Those were the reactions of the old Charlotte. The one who thought that if she just explained her feelings clearly enough, her family would stop hurting her. The new Charlotte, the owner of Redmond Holdings and the proprietor of Lark and Lumen, knew better. I knew that in the world of high-stakes compliance, you do not argue with the offender. You file the paperwork. On a Tuesday morning, 3 days after I bought the store, Elena Vance filed a stack of motions with the St. Louis County Probate Court that was an inch thick. We filed a petition to remove executor for cause, citing breach of fiduciary duty and embezzlement of estate assets. We filed a civil complaint for conversion and fraud against Diane Redmond. We filed a request for a temporary restraining order, freezing all estate assets to prevent further liquidation, and crucially, we attached the exhibits. Exhibit A, the will. Exhibit B, the forged authorization. Exhibit C. The affidavit of the store owner. Me confirming the intake of stolen goods. I dropped the legal guillotine in silence. The reaction was immediate, but it was not the apology I might have fantasized about as a child. It was a counter-offensive. By Wednesday afternoon, my phone began to ring. It was not my mother. It was my Aunt Carol. "Charlotte," she said, her voice trembling with that specific Midwestern mix of judgment and concern. "I just got off the phone with your mother. She is hysterical. She says you are suing her, your own mother." "I am petitioning the court, Aunt Carol," I said calmly, sitting in the back office of my store. "She said you are trying to bankrupt them over a piece of jewelry," Carol went on. "She told me Ethan is in trouble, that he made a mistake, and she was just trying to help him. She said you have plenty of money. Charlotte, she said you are doing this out of spite because you were always jealous of him." I listened to the narrative taking shape. It was a smart angle. They were painting me as the wealthy, heartless career woman crushing her struggling, blue-collar family over a shiny rock. They were weaponizing my success against me. "Did she tell you she forged my signature?" I asked. "She said she signed it on your behalf because you were unavailable," Carol snapped. "She said you would have wanted to help your brother if you were not so cold." I hung up. The smear campaign had begun. Within 24 hours, I received texts from 2 cousins and a family friend, all variations of the same theme. "Let it go. Don't destroy the family. It's just a ring." They were winning the narrative because they were playing on emotion. I was playing on facts, and facts are boring until you make them visible. I called Elena. "They are spinning this," I told her. "They are making me the villain in the family group chat. I need to correct the record." "Be careful," Elena warned. "Defamation laws are tricky. If you say something that is not strictly provable, they can counter-sue." "I do not want to say anything," I said. "I just want to show them." "If you stick to the public record," Elena said, "you are safe. The petition we filed is public. The exhibits are public. You are allowed to discuss your own lawsuit." That night, I sat in my hotel room. I set up my phone on a small tripod. I did not use a filter. I did not put on makeup to look tragic. I wore my glasses and a plain white shirt. I recorded a 60-second video. I did not speak. Instead, I used the green screen effect to display documents behind me. First image. My grandmother's will, with the clause highlighted in yellow, to Charlotte, so she never forgets her own worth. Second image. The intake form from Lark and Lumen, zoomed in on the signature, Charlotte Redmond. Third image. A side-by-side comparison of my real signature from my driver's license and the looped, shaky forgery on the intake form. Fourth image. A single, blurred still frame from the security footage, my mother at the counter, handing over the box, the timestamp visible. I added a simple text overlay. My grandmother left me a ring to remember her. My mother forged my signature to sell it 3 weeks after the funeral. When I asked for it back, they told the family I was greedy. I posted it to TikTok and Instagram. I did not tag them. I did not use their full names. I simply captioned it, "The cost of being the responsible daughter." Then I turned off notifications and went to sleep. When I woke up, the world had shifted. The video had 40,000 views. By lunch, it had 200,000. By dinner, it was at 1 million. The internet loves a villain, but it loves a receipt even more. And I had provided impeccable receipts. The comments section was a tribunal of public opinion, and the verdict was unanimous. User 782. That signature isn't even close. That's a felony. STLR girl. Wait, is this the Redmond family in Kirkwood? I think I know the brother. Lawyer up. The fact that she sold it before probate even cleared, that's jail time. The story jumped from the algorithm to the local reality. A local St. Louis lifestyle blog picked it up with the headline, "Local executor accused of selling heirloom left to granddaughter." They did not name Diane initially, but the internet sleuths did the work. Within hours, Screenshots of Sienna's fresh start posts were circulating side by side with my video. The contrast between her celebrating new shoes and me exposing a forgery was lethal. Then came the second wave of revelations. I had assumed Sienna's debt was credit card mismanagement or perhaps medical bills, as Ethan had vaguely implied with his bad luck stories. But when you put a spotlight on a rat, you see the rest of the nest. A woman commented on my video. "Wait, is the girlfriend Sienna Miller? The one who pitched us that Velvet Horizon investment?" I clicked on the comment. I messaged the user. It turned out Sienna's $32,000 judgment was not from bad luck. It was from a lawsuit filed by 3 former friends. Sienna had roped them into a luxury inventory scheme, essentially a pyramid scheme involving non-existent designer handbags. She had taken their money, invested it, and lost it all. The court judgment was for fraud and restitution. This was not a girl who made a mistake. This was a grifter who had been caught. I forwarded the information to the blog that was covering the story. They ran an update an hour later, heirloom sale linked to investment fraud judgment. The narrative that Diane and Ethan had built the story of a struggling young couple needing a helping hand collapsed instantly. People stopped seeing a mother helping her son. They saw a mother enabling a scammer. My Aunt Carol called me back. "Charlotte," she said. Her voice was different this time, quieter. "Is it true about Sienna? Did she really steal money from her friends?" "The court records are public, Aunt Carol," I said. "Just like the forgery." I didn't know," she stammered. "Diane told me it was medical debt. She said Sienna had a cyst." "Mom lies to protect Ethan," I said. "She always has. Now you just know what it costs." But the final blow, the one that truly broke the family's defense, came from the legal filings themselves. As part of our motion for the restraining order, we had submitted the call logs and text messages that we had subpoenaed to prove the conspiracy, because the filing was not sealed. A reporter for the local paper accessed the digital file. The next morning, a screenshot of a text message from Ethan to Diane, sent on the morning of the sale, was circulating on Twitter. "Ethan, if you don't handle this today..." "She walks. She's packing a bag right now. Do you want me to be alone again if you love me? You will fix it. Use the ring." It went viral. It was the perfect encapsulation of emotional blackmail. It stripped away Ethan's golden child veneer and revealed the abusive, manipulative dynamic that I had lived with for decades. He was not a victim. He was holding his own mother hostage with the threat of his own unhappiness. The public reaction was visceral. People were horrified. He weaponized his mom's love to make her commit a crime. One comment read, "That is dark." Diane's support system evaporated. The neighbors who had brought her casseroles stopped waving. The friends from her garden club went silent. She had not just raised a thief. She had become one to serve a monster. I sat in the store, watching the metrics climb. I felt a strange sense of detachment. I was watching my family burn, but I had not lit the match. I had simply removed the fire extinguisher. Then, my work email pinged. It was a message from Lux Resale Global Ltd. Subject regarding item 74921. Inquiry from legal owner. My heart jumped. This was the reseller in Chicago, the entity that currently held the ring. I opened the email. "Dear Ms. Redmond, we are in receipt of your attorney's correspondence regarding the Platinum European Cut diamond ring. We have placed a hold on the item in our distribution center. However, please be advised that Lux Resale purchased this item in good faith from a licensed vendor. We hold valid title to the goods. We are willing to return the item to you immediately upon receipt of a payment of $18,500, which covers our purchase price plus processing and administrative fees. Alternatively, we will hold the item pending a final court order, which we understand could take 12 to 18 months. Please advise on how you wish to proceed." I stared at the screen. $18,500. They wanted me to buy back my own inheritance. They were legally technically correct. They were a good faith purchaser. Unless a court ordered them to return stolen property, they had a right to be reimbursed. I could pay it. I had the money. It would be the fastest way to end this. I could wire the funds, get the ring on Tuesday, and walk away. But then I looked at the security monitor. I looked at the empty spot where my mother had stood. If I paid for the ring, I was essentially subsidizing their crime. I would be paying the price for my mother's theft. No, I was not going to pay a ransom for what was mine. I picked up the phone and called Elena. "They want $18,000, I said. "That is standard," Elena sighed. "It is extortion with a tie on. Do you want to pay it?" "No," I said. "I want to force them." "Charlotte, a court order takes time," Elena warned. "The judge has to rule on the conversion first." "I do not need a judge," I said, looking at the viral engagement numbers on my laptop screen. "I have an audience. What are you thinking?" "Lux Resale is a brand," I said. "They rely on trust. They rely on people believing they are buying legitimate luxury, not fenced goods." "Charlotte," Elena said, her voice warning, "do not threaten a corporation." "I am not going to threaten them," I said. "I am just going to update my story. Part 2 is coming out." I hung up. I typed a reply to Lux Resale. "Dear Management, I decline your offer to sell me my own stolen property. I have a court-stamped police report listing the item as stolen. Knowingly retaining stolen property after notification negates your good faith status in the state of Illinois. I will be posting an update to my 1.5 million viewers tomorrow regarding the chain of custody of the ring. I am sure they will be interested to know which major online retailer traffics in goods stolen from estates. You have 24 hours to release the item to my attorney. Sincerely, Charlotte Redmond, owner, Lark Lumen." I hit send. I sat back. The smear campaign had failed. The truth was out. My family was in ruins. And now, I was staring down a corporation. I checked my phone. There was a new text from Ethan. "Please, make it stop. Mom is not talking. She is just sitting in the dark. We will do anything." I looked at the message. "We will do anything." It was too late for anything. They should have thought about that before they walked into my store. I did not reply. I was saving my words for the courtroom. The viral storm was just the weather. The hurricane was about to make landfall. The courtroom smelled of floor wax and old wood, a scent that usually signaled anxiety for the people sitting on the benches. But for me, as I walked down the center aisle of courtroom 4B at 9 in the morning, it smelled like inevitable consequences. I wore a navy suit, tailored and sharp. I carried my briefcase in one hand and a stark calmness in the other. Across the aisle, my family was already seated. The contrast was painful to witness. My mother, Diane, looked 10 years older than she had 3 weeks ago. She was huddled in her coat, dabbing her eyes with a crumpled tissue, radiating the energy of a martyr awaiting execution. Beside her, Ethan sat with his legs bouncing nervously, wearing a suit that did not fit him, likely bought for a job interview he never attended. He looked angry, his jaw clenched, staring at the back of the bailiff's head as if the legal system were a personal insult to his dignity. And then there was Sienna. She sat a foot away from Ethan, creating a deliberate physical gap. She was dressed in a modest cardigan and slacks, looking nothing like the girl who had been popping champagne on Instagram a week ago. She kept her eyes fixed on her hands, refusing to look at Ethan, refusing to look at Diane, and absolutely refusing to look at me. Judge Hallowell entered the room. She was a woman in her 60s with reading glasses perched on the end of her nose and an expression that suggested she had zero tolerance for family nonsense. "We are here for the matter of the estate of Vivian Hart," Judge Hallowell said, opening the file. "Petition for removal of executor and motion for the return of converted property." My attorney, Elena Vance, stood up. She did not raise her voice. She did not pace. She simply laid out the timeline with the precision of a surgeon. "Your Honor," Elena began, "the facts of this case are not in dispute. They are documented in black and white. On September 1st, Vivian Hart passed away, leaving a specific bequest of a platinum diamond ring to her granddaughter, the petitioner, Charlotte Redmond. On September 22nd, before the inventory was filed and without the beneficiary's consent, the executor, Diane Redmond, removed this item from the estate." Elena walked to the projector. She displayed the forged authorization document. The executor then forged the beneficiary's signature on a consignment agreement at Lark and Lumen Jewelers. She sold the item for $12,000, less than half its appraised value, and immediately wired the proceeds to a third party to settle a personal debt belonging to her son's girlfriend. The courtroom was silent. I watched my mother. She let out a small, strangled sob. "Mrs. Redmond," the judge said, looking over her glasses. "Is this true? Did you sign your daughter's name?" Diane stood up slowly. Her lawyer, a tired-looking public defender she had hired at the last minute, tried to signal her to sit down, but Diane was operating on pure emotion. "Your Honor," Diane said, her voice trembling, "I am a mother. My son was in trouble. He told me that his partner was going to go to jail if they did not pay this debt. I was terrified. I did not do it for myself. I did it to save my family." She turned to look at me, tears streaming down her face. "Charlotte has a good job. She has money. She did not need the ring. Ethan needed a lifeline. I was just trying to protect my son. That is what a mother does." It was the same speech she had given me for 30 years. "Ethan needs it more. You are strong. He is fragile." Judge Hallowell was unimpressed. She leaned forward. "Mrs. Redmond," the judge said, her voice steel. "Being a mother is not a legal defense for felony forgery, and being an executor is a fiduciary duty. That means you are legally required to protect the assets for the beneficiaries named in the will, not the ones you prefer. You do not get to redistribute an inheritance because you think one child needs it more. That is theft, plain and simple." Diane shrank back, stunned that her tears had not worked. "Furthermore," the judge continued, "claiming you did it to save someone from a debt that turned out to be a civil judgment for fraud hardly paints your son in a sympathetic light." Ethan's head snapped up. He looked furious. Then came the moment I had been waiting for. "We would like to call our witness regarding the transaction at the jewelry store," Elena said. "We call Charlotte Redmond." I stood up and walked to the witness stand. I swore to tell the truth. "Ms. Redmond," Elena said, "you are the plaintiff. But you also hold another role in this case, correct?" "I do," I said clearly. "I am the owner of Lark and Lumen Jewelers." A gasp went through the room. Ethan's mouth fell open. Diane stopped crying and stared at me. They had heard rumors, but hearing it under oath was different. "I purchased the business 7 days ago," I continued, keeping my eyes on the judge. "As the owner, I conducted an internal audit of the transaction records. I am submitting into evidence the original intake video, the audio logs of phone calls from Ethan Redmond to the store manager, and the internal emails confirming that the staff suspected forgery but were pressured to proceed." I handed the drive to the bailiff. "This is not just a family dispute," I said. "This is a documented conspiracy to defraud the estate. My store was used as the vehicle for this crime, and as the owner, I am testifying that the signature on the intake form is a forgery." The judge looked at the evidence. She looked at the video of my mother signing my name while Sienna stood guard in the background. "The court accepts the evidence," Judge Hallowell said. She looked at the defense table. "Mr. Redmond, Ms. Miller, the evidence places you both at the scene or involved in the coercion of the executor." Ethan stood up, his face red. "I did not force her. She wanted to do it. She is the mom." "Sit down," the bailiff barked. "And Ms. Miller," the judge said, turning her gaze to Sienna, "you are listed as the recipient of the funds. You were present at the sale." Sienna stood up. She looked at Ethan, and then she looked at the judge. I saw the calculation in her eyes. The ship was sinking, and she was not going to drown with the captain. "I did not ask them to steal it," Sienna said, her voice shaking but clear. "I just told Ethan I had a debt. He told me he would handle it. He said his mother had a family fund. I did not know they were stealing Charlotte's ring until we got to the store." "You liar," Ethan shouted. "You told me you would leave me if I did not get the money by Friday. You sent me the texts." "I said I would leave you because you are broke and irresponsible," Sienna shouted back, dropping the innocent act entirely. I did not tell you to make your mother commit a crime that was your idea. Order. The judge banged her gavel. But the damage was done. The relationship had detonated in open court. The fresh start was over. They were tearing each other apart to save their own skins. I sat there, unmoved. I watched them scream at each other, the golden son and his prize, and I felt nothing. No satisfaction, no pity. Just the relief of validation. I was not crazy. I was not greedy. I was right. Judge Hallowell silenced the room. I have heard enough, she said. The chain of custody is clear. The intent is clear. She looked at Diane. Diane Redmond, you are hereby removed as executor of the estate of Vivian Hart, effective immediately. You are ordered to provide a full accounting of all remaining assets to the court-appointed administrator within 48 hours. She looked at the papers regarding the ring. Regarding the specific bequest, the judge said, the court orders that the item be returned to the plaintiff. I understand the current holder, Lux Resale Global, has surrendered the item to the court clerk this morning to avoid liability. Elena nodded. They have, Your Honor. Good, the judge said. The ring is returned to Ms. Redmond. Furthermore, judgment is entered against Diane Redmond, Ethan Redmond, and Sienna Miller, jointly and severally, for the costs of the legal fees and any loss in value to the estate, and Mrs. Redmond. Diane looked up, her face gray. I am referring the evidence of forgery to the district attorney's office, the judge said. Whether they choose to prosecute a grieving widow is up to them, but this court will not seal the record of a felony. The gavel came down. It sounded like a gunshot. I walked to the clerk's desk. The clerk, a young woman who looked like she wanted to high-five me, handed me a small sealed plastic bag. I signed the receipt. I took the bag. I walked out of the courtroom and into the hallway. The air was cooler here. I opened the bag and tipped the ring into my palm. It was cold. The platinum was heavy, substantial. The diamond caught the fluorescent lights of the hallway and threw back a defiant sparkle. It looked exactly as it had on Grandma's hand invincible. I held it up to the light. I tilted it to see the inside of the band. There, worn but legible, was the engraving I knew was there. Vivian Arthur, 1948. And beneath it, the tiny scratch Grandma had added years later, which I had only learned about from the appraisal note, Own Your Worth. I closed my hand around it. It was not just carbon, it was justice. Charlotte, I turned. Diane and Ethan were coming out of the courtroom. Sienna had already vanished, likely sprinting to her car to block Ethan's number. Diane was weeping openly now. Ethan looked defeated, his arrogance stripped away. Charlotte, Diane said, reaching out a hand. Please, the judge. She said she is referring it to the police. You have to stop this. You cannot let them arrest me. I did not let them do anything, I said, my voice steady. You did this? You signed the paper? I did it for him, she wailed, gesturing to Ethan. He is your brother, and I am your daughter, I said. But that never seemed to matter as much. Did it? Ethan stepped forward. Look, Char, we are screwed. Okay, you won. You got the ring. You own the store. You have all the money. Just help us with the legal fees. Please, Mom can't go to jail. If you help us one last time, we will never ask for anything again. I looked at him. He was 30 years old, and he was still begging for a bailout. He had learned nothing. No, I said. The word hung in the air. Simple. Absolute. What? Ethan blinked. No, I repeated. No legal fees, no bail money, no family loans, no access to my house, no access to my life. You can't do that, Diane whispered. We are family. I am a creditor, I said, and you are a bad investment. I looked at my mother one last time. Grandma told me you would burn down the village to keep him warm. She was right, but you forgot one thing. Mom, I am not part of the village anymore. I am the fire inspector. I turned around. I heard Diane call my name, her voice cracking, but I did not stop. I walked down the long marble hallway. my heels clicking a rhythm of finality. I drove straight to Lark and Lumen. I unlocked the door and stepped into the quiet cool of the store. I did not turn on the main lights. I liked the shadows. I did not drive to the store. I drove downtown, to the address written on the back of the appraisal. Union Station Private Vaults was quiet, a sanctuary of steel and silence. I used the combination Grandma had left me, 8249. Box 104 slid open. It was empty, save for a small note that read, "For when you win." I placed the velvet box inside. The ring was not in a store anymore. It was not in a garage. It was exactly where she wanted it to be, safe, secret, and mine. I closed the box. Click. It was done. I felt light. It was safe now. It was under my lock, my key, and my terms. I looked at the monitors. The store was empty. The closed sign was flipped outward to the street. I had spent my whole life trying to earn my place in a family that had already sold my seat to the highest bidder. I had slept in the garage of their affection while Ethan lived in the master bedroom. But today, the garage was closed, the house was sold, and the ring was home. I closed the safe door. I spun the dial. Click. Click, click. I walked out of the office, through the showroom, and to the front door. I looked out at the street. People were walking by, laughing, living their lives, unaware of the war that had just ended inside these walls. I turned the key in the lock. It was done. I was not happy in the way people in movies are happy. I did not feel like jumping in the air. I felt something better. I felt light. I walked to my car, the heavy brass keys of the store jingling in my pocket, and for the first time in 32 years, I drove away without looking in the rearview mirror. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I hope Charlotte's victory gave you the same satisfaction it gave me. I'd love to know where you are tuning in from. Drop a comment below with your city or country, so we can see how far this story has traveled. If you enjoyed this revenge drama, please make sure to subscribe to Veronica Revenge Stories. Hit the like button, and smash that hype button to help this video get recommended to more people. Your support means the world and helps us bring more justice to the channel. See you in the next story.